Hello and welcome. My name is Fred Meyer and I am Solution Consultant here at LastPass. Welcome to the LastPass Mastery Moments series. This episode is about how to configure LastPass with Azure AD. We will get quite into a bit of technical detail, so hold on tight. There are several primary objectives of this content. The first is to walk through the process of the provisioning and synchronizing of users in LastPass Business through Azure AD. The second objective is to configure the user federated login feature in LastPass Business so that the user can log in into their vaults with Azure AD credentials. This video guide will take a step-by-step approach to the entire process with some helpful commentary along the way. Before we get started, let's quickly check the requirements that are needed for this integration. Make sure you have all of the following elements. A premium tier subscription for Microsoft Azure Active Directory, an active trial or paid LastPass business account, an active LastPass business admin account. This is part of your business account. And lastly, users must be able to receive emails through the email address assigned to the users through Azure AD. So that means users need to be able to retrieve the emails and also that the email address you're using is publicly resolvable so that LastPass can send an email there and the user will be able to log in and click on the activation email. Let's start by making sure we understand the architecture for provisioning and synchronization and how it works. So LastPass includes an Azure AD SCIM integration, which you can fully configure and will allow you to fully automate the process of onboarding, so the provisioning and deprovisioning of users, as well as a mechanism to create and update groups within LastPass using the groups in your Azure Active Directory. Next, we will have a look how federated login works. So this is a separate integration and it can be used in combination with the provisioning, and it has to be used in combination with the provisioning. And it will allow your users to use their Azure AD credentials to log in into the LastPass vault. Now, because LastPass works with a zero-knowledge model, that also means that the user, when they first log in into LastPass, they will create locally a hidden master password, and this master password will be stored, a part of it onto the Azure Active Directory and another part onto the LastPass federated login service. So this will make sure that only the user will be able to encrypt and decrypt have his vault locally after he combined both pieces of the encryption key locally. It also means that we as a provider, we maintain the zero knowledge policy. Let's start by having a look on how to configure LastPass provisioning app in Azure AD. So first of all, the first step is to create a provisioning token and to capture the connection URL in LastPass. And it is recommended to open a text editor to put this information in. So you connect to the LastPass admin console, and actually there's a step before that. You have to enable permit super admins to reset master passwords policy. So you go into policies, you search, for example, for reset, make sure you don't have any policy status enabled, and then you have to make sure that the permit super admins to reset master passwords policy is enabled. Once this is done, we can continue by logging in and going into users directories in the LastPass application. So we go to users, directories, and here we obviously want to configure Azure AD. So the first step is to either create or reset a provisioning token. And what we will need is the URL here, which we can copy, and the token, which we can copy into a secure location, for example, if you have to reconfigure the access. You can also leave the tab open. That is what I'm going to do for this tutorial to access the information. Make sure that you have a 8-digit number behind Skim API, might also be a number more or less. This is your unique tenant ID, which is required. The next step is, well, this is actually all information about what I've just explained. So to have the information at hand, both the URL and the provisioning token, and we can continue on step number 2 to configure a provisioning app for LastPass and Azure AD. So you open portal azure.com, and then it asks us to go to Azure Active Directory, which is here, Enterprise Applications on the left-hand side, and then create a new application. As you can see, I don't have any application created here, but yeah, if you have already an existing Azure tenant, then you might already have certain applications here. We click on New Application, and now we select Create Your Own Application. We will put in the name, for example, LastPass Provisioning App. The name doesn't really matter. It is important for you to be able to, to find it again. And the next is we will select the application name, and you can use the image below. Let's do it again. And integrate any you don't find in the gallery, and click Create. And this can take a while, a few seconds. We will wait until the application is created. Then we will go into the application and select provisioning to continue with the steps mentioned below. So the application has been created, and we can go. We are in the application already, and we can select here provisioning. If you don't find it, you can go back to the Microsoft Azure portal, select Enterprise Applications, and there you will find the application. And here it asks us to select provisioning and then to get started. Select automatic. Paste the connection URL, and in the secret token, paste the token URL. This is the tenant URL, and this is the secret token. We test the connection. That connection works. If it doesn't work, something is wrong. If you are sure you put in the right information, contact tech support. The next step will be to save this information. And yeah, that's one thing in Azure that I don't like so much. The save buttons are all over the place. Some are up, some are down. You will notice this during this tutorial. It's quite funny. So I click on save. And it's saved. I click on mappings, select provision Azure directory groups. These steps are mandatory. We need to configure those in order the application to work. Scroll down and check the box for show advanced options. There we have it. Tick. Scroll down. Click edit attribute list for custom apps SSO. Edit attribute list for custom apps SSO. And now ID. Type string. Checkbox for primary key. Checkbox for required. Yep. External ID. Type string. Checkbox required. Tick. Display name. Type string. Checkbox required. Yeah. And the last one, members. Type reference. Checkbox for multi-value. Referenced object attribute. Use the drop-down menu and select the referenced object menu. Select the first one, the group, and select Enterprise 2.0 users. To select it, now click Save. Yes. And return to the attribute mapping. Return to the attribute mapping. We are in the attribute mapping. Under Mappings, select Provision Active Directory Users. So we go back. And here we have the mappings. And we go to Provision Azure Active Directory Users. We select the custom apps important, custom apps SSO, value maps user. Valid email address, that is what I explained already. And there's another information which is not required for me to do now. View the default Azure Active Directory mapping list, which will display the following. User principal name. Custom apps SSO, matching precedence 1, yes. Switch, and I think, there we are, switch, false, true, true, false, yeah, active. Display name, and mail nickname, external ID. Scroll down and select the Show Advanced Options. Click Edit Attribute List for Custom App SSOs. ID, string, primary key, checkbox, required, checkbox. Active, Boolean. That is okay. Username, string, checkbox, required. External ID, string, checkbox, required. Yeah, I'm not going to hide from you. It's a big advantage if you have a large screen with a high resolution. Select Save, yes, save. Select Save, yes. And return to the attribute mapping. In the attribute mapping section, make the following sections. So we are in the user principal name. Change the matching precedence value from 1 to 2, you see? And then we click OK. Next, mail nickname. Select mail nickname. Click on mail nickname. Change the source attribute from mail nickname to object ID. You can hit O. No, doesn't work. object ID. For the match objects using this attribute, select yes. From 2 to 1. Click OK. User principal name. As you notice, we're going back, so things change here dynamically. You have to follow these steps in the same way that I am performing them, otherwise they will not work. Select user principal name to open the edit attribute screen once again. That is what we did already. For the match object, select no. Click OK. Delete all other attribute mappings. So we need user principal name, male nickname, no, should be present. Only the following are required. We have object ID. We have a switch. We have user principal name and display name. So because we edited those, they are all here, and we can then continue to delete all the others. Yeah, no, I was too fast. Or better to say, so we check again. We have user principal name, and we have to start from the beginning. So this is what can happen, and it's really important that you go through it as and you take your time to do these modifications. So we have to complete everything again. Select user principal name. We are in user principal name, and change the matching precedence from 1 to 2. Click OK. Select male nickname. We have to go through this again. Male nickname to object ID. Yes. From 2 to 1. OK. User principal name. Select user principal, match the no. Click OK. Delete all other attribute mappings, only the following 4. Object ID, the switch, the user principal name, and the display name. This time I will start from the bottom to make sure I don't delete the one. We have 4. Let's verify. Object ID, external ID, matching present once. User principal name, username. It can be in a different, doesn't have to match exactly the same sequence. Display name is display name, and switch is soft deleted false, true, true, false. And then we save. Yes. Now we select provisioning. Select settings. So we have to go back to the LastPass provisioning app. Select provisioning, select settings, then toggle the provisioning status. Switch to on. Well, In this case, the provisioning status is in LastPass provisioning app. We are in provisioning. Settings. Is there a settings? There is no settings. We can also start the provisioning. Because this is what we will do. And now we can add users to synchronize them. This is not part of the tutorial, but I will show it nevertheless. So you can use and select users from your Azure AD deployment and select the users one by one. Or ideally, why you would do this is you would select a group and provision that. Be aware that it can only be a group, not a nested group. This is not supported by Microsoft through skim provisioning. That is the method we are using here. So we have configured the provisioning. And what we will have to do now is we will have to wait for the provisioning to happen. Excuse me. If we look at the provisioning details, we will see when this is completed. Typically, the interval is 40 minutes. So in the worst case, we will have to wait for 40 minutes until the first synchronization went through. We can view the provisioning logs in case there are issues with the provisioning, and then we can further analyze those information. Be aware that I tried stopping and restarting the provisioning app, but that didn't work very well. So I still had to wait for 40 minutes. What we will do in the meantime is we will continue and also configure the LastPass login app for LastPass in Azure, since we're already at it. And it worked relatively smooth. So what we will do is they want us again to go into our Microsoft Azure AD portal into the home section. And basically we select Azure Active Directory. And now it is asking us to select app registrations here and to create a new registration. We will create a new registration and name this LastPass login app. Select the radio button for the accounts in the organizational directory only setting. Select register. We have now created the LastPass login app. We need to capture the values, and we will need some information here. So we are in the LastPass login app. We select Essentials, and there's the application ID, which we will copy. And yeah, we will use this later on. And then we also need the OpenID Connect information. This one we will also need. So I will very quickly open here a notepad for that. And I will put in the information. which was the application ID. And then we will need the OpenID connect information metadata. With overview still selected, select endpoints. And here we will need OpenID connect metadata document. It's this one. We copy this one and we open our notepad. And now we have this information, which is the OpenID connect metadata. All right. Now we go back and we continue with the next. Select authentication, click add a platform, select web. In the redirect URL selection, enter this. If your account is in the EU, also enter this. So we should select those two ticks and click on configure. Within the web section under the redirect URL, select add URL. Add URL. Click save. The save button is on the bottom. Configure API permissions for the login app for LastPass. Select API permissions on the left-hand side. Click add a permission. Select Microsoft Graph. Delegate permissions. Under select permissions, check the boxes to enable the following permission names. OpenID permissions, check the boxes. Email, OpenID, profile. User, read, user read write. Well, if we don't have this, it's not gonna work. So click on add permissions, and the reason is we have to write a piece of the key into the user attribute store. Click grant admin consent for your company name. Yes to confirm. Configure the logging app to allow federated login via the mobile app when conditional access policies are enforced. Optional. I'm not going to configure this. Proceed to step number 4. Enter the application client from into the LastPass admin console. Return to the select users federated login Azure ID. And here I need to put in the information that I have put in earlier. So the application ID is the second line, the application ID, see? And then we have the OpenID connect, that is the URL, and that one is in the first line. We enable this one, and we don't have any conditional access policies enabled, so we don't have it. We click on Save Changes and open Azure AD setup failed. And well, I can tell you why, because this URL is not a URL. Let's try again. Azure AD setup successful. Quite nice. So that seemed to have worked. Next article, add users groups to the versioning in Azure. We go to enterprise, provision, add users, add groups, and so on and so forth. The setup is complete. Well, what we can do now is, before I stop, I would have to add users now to this application, and I can find the application in Enterprise Applications. There I will find the LastPass login app and the provisioning app. If I want to have users to use the login app, so federated login, I have to add them into the provisioning and into the login app. If I want only to use provisioning and not federated login, at least not for every user, then I can put in the users only in the provisioning app, and they will get added and federated and they will get added and disabled in case they leave the provisioning apps groups. So that brings us to the end of this video. Over the past 30 minutes or so, we have explained how to configure the LastPass business integration with Azure AD. We started off by reviewing the prerequisites in order to start the integration. We then configured the LastPass provisioning app and the LastPass federated login app, and we checked then the provisioning status. Please note that the installation guides are provided in the notes area of this video. Contact your LastPass solution consulting team if you need further assistance with your evaluation for LastPass business, or contact our technical support in case you are an existing customer and still or would like some additional information or help with the configuration of the Azure AD connector. I am Fred Meyer, and this marks the end of the video of this Mastery Moment series. Thank you very much for watching, and have a good day. Bye-bye.